Hi and welcome to this week's Property Matters, a show that brings global trends to an Irish audience to help shape your knowledge of the industry. We're on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts this evening are myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Talon.
Okay, good evening. So just a quick look at some of the stories this week. First of all, Agriland, one of the leading publications aimed at Ireland's farming community, reported that there will be no more one-off housing in very rural settings. So these new rules come on foot of the Project Ireland 2040, the National Planning Framework, and it's to encourage cluster living around existing towns and villages. It is reported that over the next 12 to 18 months, these rules will actually be inserted into the county development plans, and as a direct result, members of landowners' family will no longer be granted planning permission to build a house on family land. So I'm sure we can expect some pushback from the farming community on that. In relation to the Help to Buy scheme, the Independent today reports that an extension will be needed in order to hit housing goals. In fact, since 2017, the scheme has been helping first-time buyers with the deposit required to purchase or build a new home by providing a tax refund, and it's estimated that the scheme contributes to around 80% of first-time buyer property purchases. Also, it's been a bumper week for new housing development announcements, with Paddy McKillen Jr.'s Oakmount obtaining planning for 291 new homes in South Dublin. Cairn, Ardstone and Glenveigh are planning 500 houses and apartments in Naas, and plans have been lodged for a further 920 new homes across 3 developments in Howth, Fingal and Palmerstown. Now, interestingly, this comes hot on the heels of Goodbody's quarterly Irish Economy Health Check, which confirms that housing sales have lagged behind supply recently, leading to an increase in the unsold stock of homes.
Very good, Carol. Well, as many people are aware at the moment, parliamentary season is finishing. The spring season is over. So from the point of view of parliamentary news, there's very little going on at the moment. So because of the fact that there is a situation now has arisen in New York, and I live there, I think it might be a chance to sort of chat about something that's very, very controversial over there. So, just to give listeners and everybody a sort of a background to this, there was a time in America when the power balance between the landlord and the tenant was very much in the landlord's favour. For example, when you rented an apartment, the landlord knew whether the heat would come on in the winter, but you didn't. The landlord knew a fair rent in the neighbourhood, but you didn't. The landlord knew your credit history, but you didn't know if he was a slumlord. So to try and address this imbalance, rent control was introduced in 1950. And New York adapted the idea full square, and that every rental apartment was subject to it. However, down the years, rent control has been declining. Despite 45% of rental units still being rent regulated, hundreds of thousands have lost that status in the last 40 years. The reason, and not to put a fine point on it, the tenant movement has been beaten by the landlord lobby in that every time the rental laws are reviewed, new loopholes are introduced, allowing some units to leave the stabilisation system. Last week, there was a dramatic turn of events when the New York State Assembly announced a landmark agreement to strengthen the city's rent laws. Ultimately, the change would abolish rules that allow landlords and building owners deregulate apartments, closing a series of loopholes. As you expect, the real estate industry is not at all happy and feels that the new measures will have a serious effect on housing in New York City. It should be borne in mind that up to now the rent control status was exclusive to New York, but the new legislation will now have statewide coverage or status, whatever way you're looking at. So really, I suppose with their own legislation too, with the rental I always forget the Rental Tenancies Board.
The RTB here.
The
in
RTB.
Ireland,
it kind of has the same sort of resonance here, I think, doesn't it, Karen?
Well, actually, we were just speaking off air, and rent control is one of those things that's thrown around a lot in media interviews. And the reality is that I don't think that even our rent pressure zones, we're not getting to the same place as rent control in the US. So they're not comparable. They've got similar names, but really they're not comparable. The one thing that's quite relevant about this is we can see that there's a strengthening of tenants' rights, and that's absolutely happening here in Ireland. In fact, I would say to the detriment of many estate agents. And I'm delighted today that we're joined by Lorraine Mulligan of Team REMAX.
Carl, yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. Thanks. Lovely to be here with you, Carl and Brian, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, it's Lorraine Mulligan, Team Lorraine Mulligan, REMAX Results. And I own the franchise for Celbridge and for Lucan, but we sell and rent loads of houses from Lucan right up as far as Clonard and County Meath, really up that M4 corridor.
See,
So
the word results there is what
results.
sticks out, isn't it?
Thank you, Carl. Yeah,
Results,
yeah,
I like
results,
it.
'cause
Yeah.
that's what we get.
So, look, talk to us. You're obviously involved. Are you involved actually in rentals as well as sales?
Yeah, we do have a rental and property management company as well, and we obviously sell a lot of residential homes too. So we're kind of, our finger is in both pies.
Okay, so what do you make of this? You know, when we're talking about the rental crisis, now obviously you're working kind of between kind of Lucan up to Celbridge.
Yeah.
What's the rental market like, and is it fair for us to say that a very pro-tenant approach has been taken?
Yeah, basically what's after happening is the laws now all side with the tenant, and the landlord now has very little rights and very little say. And so what's happening is a lot of these landlords now, they feel the market is at the top. They have made money in their investment properties and they're starting to offload them. And therefore we have a lot of lovely people who cannot rent property. And it's causing an awful gridlock in the property market, because if somebody's trying to buy a property and if they're not ready to go, they can't purchase the property. But then these people are saying, Lorraine, if I sell my home, where am I going to go? Because I know I have to sell my house to buy a house, but where am I going to go in the interim? So it's really gridlock, and a lot of investors are offloading their property, and we need to get the investors back buying property again without it being detrimental to the first time buyer.
Yeah, and actually it's an interesting one. It's something we've covered here before, that there are very few jurisdictions where you're looking at property markets where you have institutional investors, first-time buyers, cash buyers, and essentially mom and pop investors and local authorities and approved housing bodies all competing for the same stock of property. That just doesn't happen in other markets, because there is stock aimed at first time buyers, and then there's stock aimed at investors, and then there's stock aimed at institutional investors.
So it's all marketed in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But we actually have the same, or we have this wide range of buyers all competing for the same tiny pool of property.
Yeah, and it's very, very wrong. Like, it's like there's a big stewing pot with everybody, all the ingredients thrown into the mix.
So what do you think could be done to try and solve that quandary that there is here at the moment?
I think just investors need to start coming back into the marketplace, but at the same time I don't want to see the first time buyers pushed out. So whatever way that can happen, I'm not too sure, but it needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because people used to buy property as part of a pension fund. That's all stopping now. It's all drying up, and there's just less and less rental accommodation coming to the marketplace. And it's very sad, because as soon as we put something on the market, we have to actually take it offline very, very quickly, because our phones in our offices actually get jammed. And then we've people coming in nearly crying looking for a property, and there's people on social welfare, there's professional people, there's people on HAP, and everybody deserves a home, you know, no matter what
Tell me,
status
do you
they're.
think does it need more
Absolutely.
legislation? Because there's 4 or 5 pages from the New York Times in relation to that one issue, and in relation to the whole political background to that story in itself, rental control, as we just discussed. So do you think there's legislation needed to solve that situation?
Oh,
What
absolutely,
you've
Brian.
described?
Yeah, absolutely. Something needs to be done. It needs to be done pretty quickly. And it's not landlords, it's not worth their while having investment property now, because they have to pay so much of their taxable income in rent, and all this legislation now is siding with the tenants. You know, before it was, you know, especially with British rule, it was all about, you know, the landlords, the tenants had no say, which is not right. But now it's gone the other way, where tenants have a lot of the say. So if a landlord engages somebody and they put them into a property and they're the wrong tenant, it can be incredibly difficult to get them out. And they can be there for years. And it's
actually,
very wrong.
There is something very wrong in that. In fact, again, one of the things that myself and Brian were discussing off air earlier is that there are very few other countries where a tenant could overhold on a property for up to 3 years before they're actually moved out. And part of the issue is that this is civil and not criminal.
Yes.
So yes, I think that legislation has a purpose, but I think there has been a lot of legislation that has actually made being a landlord in Ireland very cumbersome, and there's confusion around that as well. I don't think we've got great clarity about it, and in fact one of the things that I genuinely believe will be part of the solution is the emerging build to rent sector, and yet it's vilified by a lot of housing commentators. I mean, actually, build to rent, is there much of that happening from Lucan out towards Celbridge?
We haven't come across a lot of it now, Carl.
So I presume from an investor standpoint, it would actually be a very positive thing.
It'd be a very positive thing, but I tell you what's happening as well with investors. Like, I have a lot of really good people of investment properties, and they actually don't want to sell their investment properties. But what's after happening, they might have had a very good tenant that's been in their property for years, and out of kindness, they didn't want to screw them over and charge them too much rent. But now they're in a position where they can't increase the rent at all. Where, you know, before they might have a 2-bed bed apartment, that they would have maybe let the tenant have it for $650, $750 when they should actually be getting about $1350 now for the same apartment. So a lot of these landlords are coming saying, look, Lorraine, I don't really want to sell, but I have to, just doesn't make sense. And they can't legally increase the rent. And some tenants think then if they pull out a bathroom or replace a floor or anything like that they can increase the rent. They can't. They have to make substantial renovations. And if they get caught increasing the rent, the penalties are huge for them. Like, it's very, very serious.
But isn't it fair to say that was, I won't say a loophole, but it was certainly a vague term in the original legislation around the rent pressure zones, when this not increasing the rent without substantial, or not getting a tenant out without substantial works, because actually what was deemed substantial,
you're bang on.
Now that I know that has been clarified in recent months, and that's helped the situation, but I don't think that landlords can be blamed for depending on law that was essentially vague. I mean, if we go back to the basis of contract law, there's always an interpretation that where there's any vagueness or ambiguity, it's always found in favour of the party that didn't draft it.
Yes.
So if we apply the same contract law to legislation, then any vagueness should be found in favour of the people that didn't draft it, and in this case that would be the landlord. So I don't think that we can hold them responsible for that, but also I don't think we can blame them for looking for a way out of unprofitable tenancies.
Exactly, and this is the way life works. It has to work for both sides. It's not working for the tenants, because the rent they're paying is just crazy. Like, you can buy a house now for half what you'd pay if you rent a 3-bed semi in the likes of Celbridge or Lucan. It's €1,750, €2,000 maybe a month. You can buy a lovely 3-bed semi for half the mortgage repayments. But it's not. The landlords aren't winning, the tenants aren't winning. It's a no-win situation for anyone.
Well, tell me, Dan, I know you've been in business for quite some time, and in other areas as well.
Yes, Brian.
Did a bit of homework. I'm just wondering, in the context of you've been 11 consecutive years now in this business, in the
19,
no, 19.
Oh, 19.
Yeah, it's okay.
In fact,
for my handwriting, Brian, you're grand.
No, but I'll tell you, for 11 consecutive years, you were the top selling Irish REMAX agent.
Yeah, in the country and in Europe as well. But I work with a great bunch of people. I have customers that are just wonderful people that constantly refer us business. So I'm in business 19 years.
But my question really was, though, that in terms of the business you're now in, is it worth it, do you think, in comparison to other businesses that you have been involved in?
Well, I've only ever been involved now in auctioneering.
Right, okay.
For 19 years.
Right.
I've always been involved in property.
I think just in your last comment when you were talking about why the legislation doesn't work, I think that's probably very telling. You used the term that it wasn't, it was a no-win and it wasn't a win-win. And I know from having heard commentary that you've given before that you're very strong on a win-win negotiating position.
Listen, there has to be flesh in the bones for life to work. And that, that's in every transaction, in a relationship transaction, a business transaction, there has to be a degree of fairness. And you have landlords suffering, and you have tenants suffering, and you have the government just do nothing about it. And something has to be done. So
this, look, I love the concept of a win-win when it comes to negotiations, because actually what people don't realise is that a property transaction, it doesn't happen if one party physically can't do it or feels forced in terms of maybe property isn't something that negotiating tricks work, and it's something that it's lingo that I really detest around estate agencies here, because most professional estate agents understand that the buyer today is their likely customer in 7 or 10 or 15 years as a seller. So I think the concept of win-win is a massively important one in property negotiations, and I think that you embody that very well. But I have to ask, because you have an all-female team, which is quite unusual.
Yes.
Does part of that, does this looking for a win-win solution in every case, does this come from having an all-female team? That's an incredibly sexist question to ask, is it?
Well, no. First of all, I have to tell you, right, I have massive respect for gentlemen. I'm not like burn your bra kind of, I have great respect for ladies and gentlemen, and there's good and bad in men and women, right? But any time that a job comes up, a vacancy comes up in my company, women always tend to apply for it. It's not that I don't want any gentlemen in the business, because that's not the case, because they have a huge amount to contribute as well. I suppose the business, we get results, we're very firm, we're very strong, but we do it with compassion, and we're big into customer service. and just looking after people, because people buying a property, you're not buying a pair of shoes, you're buying a home. It's all about the feeling, and it's just so important to get it right.
But it's a male-dominated business, though, isn't it? Or have I got that wrong?
Is it
Now,
still?
Brian.
Nope.
Well, you know what? You're right. I remember when I joined 19 years ago, I had a couple of people, like gentlemen, ringing me saying, "Look, what the hell are you doing?" I was sending out marketing material. Women shouldn't be auctioning. I swear to God, like there was
You
very
had people
few.
actually tell you less than 20 years ago
there was
you
very
shouldn't.
few female auctioneers out there, you know.
Yeah.
But the gentleman who owns REMAX all over the world, he did analysis and he found, with no offence to gentlemen, but he found the top producing auctioneers within his company who were getting the greatest results were women. He found the men were brilliant at managing the offices, but managing the offices, but the women were great at getting out and getting the results.
And is that in Ireland or right across the globe?
No, right across the world. He did a massive study on it, and so he would have massive respect and appreciation for both sexes.
And why do you think that is then? Why do you think women are more successful in the transactional?
I think, Brian, to be honest with you, right, I think women buy houses. I find with gentlemen, I find, you know, if the wife is happy, they tend to be happy in general. You know, it's harder to sell to a lady than it is to a gentleman, but I think as a woman you kind of understand a woman more, and you know what they really want. And as my son says, happy wife is a happy life. So I find in general the men are happy. You know, if the woman is happy, the men is in general kind of goes the flow.
Now, do you know, I have to ask you, because very recently I met a husband and wife team of landscapers.
Right.
And they said to me that their buyers are 80% male, and that stunned me, because I know in property, having worked as a buyer's agent for almost a decade nationwide, I know that women do lead the decision-making process, and I think what's interesting that they lead the shortlisting selection.
Carl, you're bang on, because we got our garden landscape by Land Art. Big shout out there for Land Art, absolutely brilliant. And Aaron did the investigation and everything. He came back with a list of names. Ultimately we made the decision together, but I said, Aaron, you go, I love you, I trust you, you do it. And so he sourced, and we sat down together, we discussed together and said, which one would you think is the best, sweetheart? And he said, Lorraine, this
so
company.
you had the final say.
Yeah, well, it was yeah, but he kind of brought all the information together. We would never do, you know, we'd always work together as a team, you know.
Yeah, and see, so I was so surprised.
It strikes me the woman is a tougher sell. Is that how you'd put it? Is that how you'd
I think it's not that women are difficult, but they just, I just think they're looking for more, you know.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Very well. It's all down to psychology, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
In that sort of scenario of a sale with the man and a woman, or with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the majority of people are wonderful. Like, it's all about, you know, listening to them and giving what they want and just being straight with and direct with them and helping them achieve what it is they're trying to achieve, you know.
You know, isn't it amazing listening as opposed to selling to them?
Oh yeah.
I think that's a vital thing.
Yeah.
Lorraine, I can't let you go without you giving a word of advice to people maybe who are thinking of selling and they're not quite sure, because as you rightly identified earlier on, there is commentary there, and there's certainly a thinking there that we've passed the top of the market. Yeah. So have you any final bit of advice for people who might be thinking of selling?
I'd say to anybody selling, it's still a very good time to sell. The market is still very buoyant, and once you price your property correctly and stage it correctly and give it to a strong agent with a very strong marketing plan, you will sell. The more expensive the house, the days of market are longer, but I would urge you to seek a professional person as a successful professional auctioneer to value your home correctly, because we're dealing with a very educated buyer, and you've got to price your house right in order to generate footfall. So, you know, go to your best agent in your locality and maybe get 2 or 3 different opinions. I think the agent that you engage can really make a huge difference to money you end up getting for the sale of your house.
Okay, great words. That was Lorraine Mulligan, owner of REMAX Results in Celbridge and Lucan. Lorraine, thank you so much for joining us.
Carl and Brian.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Dublin South FM is the station, and Property Matters is the programme. You're here with myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Tallon. On Twitter it's iPropertyRadio, and our email is hello@iPropertyRadio.com. And now in the studio we have Maria Fenlon of Maria Fenlon Interior Architecture and Design, member of the Institute of Designers of Ireland, and you're a multi-award winning international design team, or you have a multi-award winning design team.
Yes.
Welcome, nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Now,
lovely to meet you, and thank you for the opportunity.
We're delighted you're with us.
The one thing that I love to know about interior designers is when they go into a premises, what are you looking for? Are you given a brief by the person that hires you, or do you go and try and see stuff yourself before you talk to the person that's hired you?
Well, generally clients come to you with basically
Some
a
ideas.
problem. A problem. Maybe the space isn't quite working for them. It isn't meeting their needs in terms of storage, in terms of lifestyle, etc. So it's usually a problem base. And obviously I speak to the client a little before I call to the property, and then of course it's so important to call to the space, to look at it from an architectural point of view, to look at the property from a location point of view, and to meet the clients and to look at what they value, what pieces are in the house that have maybe a sentimental value for them. And then obviously from that step, it's all about really analysing the space that's available to them and really maximising the use of the space.
And can you get agreement on that factor?
Well, you do, but it's a long process.
Okay.
It takes time. It's very important to understand the client, their needs, the style that they like, which can be very unique to the particular client. So to really listen and to talk about the project, about their aims for the project, their objectives, possibly maybe their budget that they've set aside for the project. And once all that information is gathered, we like to try to, we put that together and then we basically present solutions to their design needs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to come at it from a place where people are calling you when they have a problem. It's just not something I had thought about. I always think that interior design is something that there are trends, and that, certainly I see that, from my own friends and family, there seems to be a case that when you move into your new home, whatever is being done then, there's usually about 12 years before the kitchen and the bathroom and the kids' rooms and things like that change over time. So I suppose it is a problem really adjusting to the changing needs of not just a family but an individual.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be sexist about this, but there's an interesting one here in that you've just taken, for instance, the example there that Carol has given you, that you've had the home for 12, 13, 14 years and you want to have a look at changes. Without being sexist about it, we had Lorraine in here and she was telling us that she finds it easier to finish a deal, close a deal with the woman as opposed to the man. Are there any conflicts in a relationship like that when you're doing adjustments to a house like that?
Well, actually, it's very interesting that you should say that, because it's always a challenge. And for me, actually, when I start a project, I always meet the couple, the husband and the wife, because both can have very different ideas about the project. So it's actually very important for me to listen to both their points of views and put them together then in the solution that we offer. But definitely the views can be very different. And I'm thinking of a particular project that I'm working on at the moment, and they have absolutely completely different tastes.
Is that right? Despite being married.
They're an amazing couple, but he is really technical. It's about how things work, how things close. Obviously technology, he's so interested in that, and she's got a much different view of, storage is so important to her, personal things, family, sentimental collections of photographs, and they're really coming at the project from two different places. But that's the fun part of it.
Because you're like the artist though, aren't you? Doing, say, a portrait. And then the person comes in and sees the portrait, it's a very personal thing.
Exactly. So it's to bring it together, and I do that usually by really trying to understand the style that they're trying to achieve, and I try to identify the differences, and I see them very early on and I acknowledge them, and then we try to kind of bring it together to find the solutions. And we do that. You asked, is it a long process? It's a very, very long, laboured process. But it's interesting because every time you kind of take one step forward, you're learning more about the people that you're working with.
Maria, are they learning more about
personal.
themselves? Are they
Actually, they are. Because they really are.
Yeah.
And it makes it more meaningful. And really with what I do, when you spoke about trends as well a moment ago, and that sort of irritates me a little bit, because I like to, and I really do, I try to work so that I'm not really observing. I'm certainly very aware of trends, but I come from an art background. I studied fine art, I did sculpture, And I'm very interested. I see things in a three-dimensional way, and I went on to do teaching actually, and then went to interior architecture. So for me, it's about the space and how best to maximise the space. And there are trends with colours. You know, you can see in the magazines at the moment, you know, that strong colours are very, very popular. And I recently just finished a project with an amazing couple from Navan, actually, in County Meath, a fantastic couple. But they brought me to their own house, and it was painted in dark blues, all the popular colours of the moment. And they stood me in the space and said, this is not how we want to live. So for me, it's about creating spaces that have a timeless feel, that they will love, that is about the space, about maximising the space, maybe the view from the space, the landscape outside and how that becomes part of the space. So it's about creating a timeless design, and that's really important. And I got some fantastic news. We did a beautiful project in Clonegall, actually, in County Carlow. It's on my website if anybody would like to have a look. And that project was finished 12 years ago, and for the last couple of years we've gotten calls to have it featured on Home of the Year.
All right, very good.
And they have no idea that that project is actually, you know, that you know, it dates from that far back.
And will it be
But
featured?
Yes.
Oh,
it will.
congratulations. That's fantastic.
Well, we're very close. We just
So
but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's just an amazing property. It was a mill house. It was bought. Actually, Michelle Pfeiffer, a little bit of scandal, has come to visit this house.
Oh, very good.
But what is incredible about the house for me is the landscape around the house. It's in
Clonegall is
beside-
particularly beautiful.
So beautiful. It's so picturesque.
And it's very mountainous,
It's
the
beside
hills.
the river
Yeah.
Slaney, and so we opened the house to the river. So it's a very traditional rustic building, and the concept for the interior space was to create a very minimalist, modern interior to contrast with the rustic elements. So it's not about the trend, it wasn't about the colours, it was about the architectural personality, style, character of the building.
And tell me,
that is, you know,
speaking of personality, do you find there's any difference? I know you do some work in Brussels as well. Do you find any difference in the thinking, the artistic thinking, shall we say, or of space by an Irish person in comparison to someone in Belgium?
Yes, I would.
Really?
I think, it's really interesting. I have a very, very good friend in Brussels, and I have so much time for her. She's a little bit like myself, has a huge interest in the arts. That is my background. We met in that way, but she's hugely interested in design. And there, I'm a big fan of, there's an architect, Vincent van Dyson, I don't know if you know him. He's an architect from Antwerp, and he's really interesting. He just did Kanye West's house, actually, so he's incredible. But it's all about materials. It's about, you know, subdued colours, harmonious colours, contrasts of materials, you know, combinations of materials. It's very beautiful, very subdued, very calm. But that same lady, actually, funny, I invited her over to Dunleary, and she came and stayed with us. And we did a bit of travelling around, and she couldn't get over colour here. Colours on the houses. We passed a house and she said, oh my God, it's pink. The next one was purple.
Yeah.
They're much calmer, quieter, you know, more subdued, definitely in their choice of colour and material. But actually, they're fantastically skilled and interested in craftsmanship and detail. It's very, very, very precise. But their homes are very different. And Brussels is very unusual because it's very different to Ireland, where you have a housing estate. You would never see that in Belgium. Each house is individual and different. And it's a huge interest actually
Going
for
back
people.
to space again, isn't it, Carol? As we
Yeah.
were talking about last week again, you know.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
interesting,
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the things I think is very interesting there, Maria, you were talking about UC in 3D.
I do.
How do you translate your visions to clients then?
Okay, well, it's a very detailed process. Obviously, we measure spaces first and foremost. We work with a surveyor who will go out and measure everything. And then we work in 2D, obviously 2D drawing, just to analyse the space, locations of rooms in relation to maybe the aspect, which is extremely important. And then from there, we build up 3D elevations of all spaces. We build up 3D models in SketchUp. And I have a guy who works with me on the team. He's absolutely amazing. And we do everything now in 3D Max. So we actually can show you visuals of the finished product, you know, in the
Fabulous.
process. And it's fantastic.
What's the next step to that? I mean, can you see yourself, you know, maybe using immersive technologies like virtual or augmented reality to showcase so people can really experience their home before it's transformed?
Yes, I think that would be interesting. I'd certainly like to find out more. I'm always very open to new technologies, and anything that helps people realise a decision without spending money, I feel good about, because then they're really committed and they really know that it's going to work. But there's also learning for us in the process. When I see it at the project in 3D Max, I see potential maybe to develop areas or open spaces or introduce lights. So that's what I love. I love learning through the process as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so, because I know that when clients are coming to you to give instructions, I would imagine that they're giving instructions based on what they feel can be done with the space.
Yes.
So, for example, I'm sure you meet people who say, look, the house is just too small for us.
Yes.
And so they automatically jump to, we must extend it, we must go into the attic, we must build out into the garden.
Yeah.
But do you take those instructions, or do you strip it back completely and say, no, let's look at the structure of the house?
I think it depends on the space. If they have the space to extend, I mean, obviously that's great. That's a real opportunity. If they don't, we won actually Fit Out Residential Project of the Year in 2017 for a project in
Well done.
Ranelagh, actually, and it was the remodel of the interior of a house, and that was really exciting for us, just to see the potential of the space and how best the space could be used.
What type of house was it? Like what era build?
Now, it was built actually 2008. It was a 3-story over basement, so it's not a period house.
Right.
But the basement in particular was very, very dark and pokey. They had sort of a cinema space in one area, a kitchen, living space to the back. So we just completely opened the space. And you're probably visualising it there. It's 3 stories over basement. It's a tall, narrow home. So the first floor, there were challenges with that. We opened up areas with glazing. And so there's a lot of just ideas just to really make sure that every inch of space is used.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, like so often people jump to put the extension on. We did another very nice project in Naas, and you know, we simply just re-looked at the plan, looked at the spaces.
But you have your vision then as well, obviously.
Well,
when
you do, it develops. Yeah, you can sort of see. What you do is you look at the potential, the focal point. What is interesting? What would
you
I
must
like?
have great imagination. Then you always have to. Have
I love a focal point. Actually, I had a fantastic art teacher in school. I never forget her, and I remember a lot of things that she said. But she always drew us. When you look at a painting, the artist is directing you to something of interest in the painting, and when I walk into a room, I kind of look, what is it? Is it the height of the ceiling? Is it the direction? Is it a view through the window? Is it the fireplace? Is it the floor? Is it the shape of the room? What is the focal point? So what you do is you build on the most interesting focal points, and that is where I come from.
What's your preference? Is it for domestic, or do you do any corporate work?
I did actually. I've been living in Brussels I lived in Brussels with my family for 8 years, and I'm just back in Ireland, back in Dublin for the past 2 years. But
is there much
I'm
of a
working
difference?
in this area for 17 years. But before I left, I did a lot of commercial work. I did a lot of display for furniture shops, for shows. And I love that because, again, I suppose it's going back to my sculpture background, just kind of moving and juxtaposing and trying to create interest and, again, a focal point in the display. And I did a lot of furniture shops. But when I was in Brussels, I decided I would live an expat life and put my feet up. But unfortunately, that didn't last very long, and I didn't want it to either. I was really missing work. So I was contacted by some clients in Ireland to come back and do projects. So I've commuted over and back, and very lucky. I've worked with the same people for
you could see the difference too between Dublin and Brussels as well in terms of the European aspect.
So fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, really, Brussels is the centre of Europe in terms of trade shows, in terms of just being out there to see what's out there. Antwerp is such a beautiful city. The materials, design inspiration is everywhere. So it was amazing.
Oh, that's great to hear. And then, so for people maybe, again, I can't let you leave the studio without some words of advice for people who are sitting in their home listening and looking around as we speak at all the things that they would change if they could. And again, this extra space seems to be the big thing. So, are there ways to create space or even the illusion of space in a home if you don't have the budget to extend?
So many ways. Just creating kind of a seamless flow between spaces.
Explain what that is.
It's
As in,
very
how do you
Actually,
achieve that?
I actually just went to visit a new project recently, and a lady had spent so much time with each individual room but no connection. And they're like all separate spaces. If you want to immediately create space, you link a colour in some way. The colours must link so that when you stand in one space and look to another, that it's connected. That creates a link and the feeling of space.
So is that this trend that we see of flooring as you come in the front door that runs right
Maybe.
through to the
It could be
open plan
flooring,
kitchen?
It could be colour. It could be a connection with shape. But from one space you consider what you see in each direction, and you try, mirrors can be a great way also of connecting, but colour, floors, materials, furniture, shape.
Very good. So Maria, thank you so much. So I can I take it that the key advice for people is to really look at their home, look at the bones of the house,
space you
the structure of the home.
Analyse the space you have. Think about working within your existing footprint. It's more environmentally beneficial. It requires fewer materials, resulting in less waste and requiring less energy to heat and cool the building. It's really worthwhile giving it some thought.
Very good. And if they need some design inspiration, they can go to your website.
Very happy to help.
What's your website, Maria?
Our website is www.mariafenlon.com.
Okay,
Best of luck to everyone.
Thank you. That was Maria Fenlon of Maria Fenlon Interior Architecture and a design member of the Institute of Designers of Ireland. Maria, thank you so much.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
And Property Matters is the programme with myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Talon. On Twitter, it's iPropertyRadio, at iPropertyRadio, or email, it's hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Now, Paul McCarthy is in the studio with his CEO and founder of Snapfix. So, Paul, from what I'm gathering, Snapfix is very similar to WhatsApp, but for hotels. Am I right?
That's correct, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon or this evening. Yes, Snapfix is the simplest building management solution on the planet. It allows anybody, and it allows building managers and their teams to manage entire buildings, and they use photos as the primary means of communication. So if you think of WhatsApp is brilliant for chat, Snapfix is really good for task management, including building management.
And you're the CEO of Snapfix.
That's correct.
Snapfix. How long have you been in Ireland?
How long have I been in Ireland?
How long has the product
Snapfix.
been here in Ireland?
It's all right, Paul. Your accent gives it away.
I've been in Ireland a very long time. I was away for a while, but I've been here a long time. We've been on the go for about 2 years now in development, and it's been in pilot and live in the last 12 months.
The reason I ask is I'm just wondering how it's been received now by the hotel industry.
It's been really well received in hotels. We're in over 20 hotels at the moment, and I'll give you an example. In a hotel, for example, all of the team will use Snapfix, and when anybody at any location in the hotel sees an issue, they just take a Snapfix photo, and the maintenance team can address it very, very quickly. And that's very important to hotel managers because it's all about customer experience, the guest experience, and the general managers want the issues on Snapfix and not on TripAdvisor, where they can get negative reviews and things like that.
So this is an app then the staff can use?
Correct. It starts out, there's a little bit more to it in the background than an app, but the primary interface is an app.
And is there much cooperation now with the staff in the hotel for this type of?
There is. Lots of people at the moment are using WhatsApp, or many use combination of post-it notes, texts, emails, phone calls, voicemails. So they like the fact that there's now one location to use it, and everybody can take a photo. A photo speaks 1,000 words, and a photo speaks every language. So in a lot of these hotels where they have a large audience of multilingual staff, it works really, really well for people to be able to communicate using photos.
Very good. It's not just hotels you're in, though, is it?
No, it's not. Hotels is our initial niche to prove the concept, but we're also working in office buildings, apartment buildings, factories, and also with field service providers. This would be men and women in vans driving around servicing their customers.
Very good. And where are you in terms of the business? So are you actually in trialling products, or are you actually in the marketplace?
We've actually gone into the marketplace, so we're live now with paying customers, and we're continually evolving the solution. And next year we'll be taking it to the UK and to the US.
Very good. Do you see this as a solution that might be used in the residential sector in terms of apartment blocks?
Absolutely. An apartment block is very, very similar to a hotel. The apartments are similar to hotel rooms. So a building manager could use it to manage all of the snags or the any of the issues happening within each of the apartment blocks. Similarly for office buildings, etc.
It does sound like a sort of mass market product, doesn't it?
It is, yeah. We're hoping that this will become the WhatsApp for building maintenance globally.
And could you adapt it for domestic use as well, do you think?
Absolutely. I use it myself to snag everything that's still not done in my own house.
Very good. Well, look, obviously I have a huge interest in Irish proptechs, and one of the things I see is that we've got amazing innovation, but sometimes you have a few people solving problems for the same clients, and if they could just plug in together some way. So are there any solutions on the marketplace that maybe complement your offering?
There are quite a few, and lots of the technologies are evolving very, very quickly.
And
everything
can you
from
plug into them?
Virtual reality headsets can provide content to Snapfix. There are other solution providers that provide video-based training to hotels, for example, where the staff do a little bit of training every day over maybe a 200-day period, so that they learn everything about the hotel by incremental training. So we're also looking at partnering with companies like that.
Okay, and will you talk to me a little bit about the technology behind this?
We've architected it for global scale from day one, so it's everything is based on an Amazon Web Services server, which just happens to be here in Ireland, which is fantastic. We will have servers in the States and across the world as the years progress, and everything then is built on native iOS, Apple. And native Android. We do that for performance reasons.
And is it all web-based, or do you have, all app-based, or do you have a web?
It's what we call it is it's a mobile-first application. So everything is on the mobile phone first, and we're rolling out a website very, very shortly. We wanted to make sure we had all the functionality right on the mobile first, and then we're having a website solution for it as well.
Okay, so when you say mobile first, though, generally mobile first would mean it's a mobile web solution, but is yours an app available through the App Store?
Correct.
Have to ask them, because it's something that Irish PropTech's been having such a difficulty with, and it's come up here before. Did you have difficulty getting it listed in the Apple Store?
No. I've got a very, 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 very high quality software development team who are experienced in getting apps into the app stores.
Yeah.
So.
And any lead-in time delays?
It's much faster on Android, on the Google Play Store, because there are less checks involved, but Apple does put you through a series of tests, so sometimes we have been delayed, but the delays have been typically a couple of days, where they just want to verify that there's nothing unusual in the code. And when we explain exactly what we're doing we use a lot of photos, video capture and those technologies, and they want to make sure that everything is being done right.
Okay, so say for hotels, do they need to, do staff members need to have a certain grade or level of phone in order to work the app?
No, just like if you think back when you learned to use WhatsApp yourself, nobody ever showed you how to use WhatsApp. It was intuitive and it was super simple.
Oh no, but I mean the technology of the phones. Does it need to be a smartphone?
Oh, sorry, it does need to be a smartphone.
A certain generation smartphone, though, as in, will any old Samsung or any old will an old iPhone pick it up?
We have it running on 4 and 5 year old iPhones. Anything before that,
Okay.
I'm not sure. There's not too many of them around. We don't see that as an issue.
Yeah, no, that's great, because these are the kind of issues that trip up technology providers when you're talking about rolling something out across a hotel or a commercial building or a property maintenance company or something like that. Can you talk to us about the business model?
I can. For hotels, we charge on a per room basis. Hotels are very used to purchasing software and solutions on a per room model. And then for buildings and offices, it's based on the number of offices and the number of apartments.
Fantastic. How has take-up been in terms of not just the level of take-up, but I understand pitching new technologies can be difficult, especially when there's been such a rise in innovative solutions at the moment that buyers are quite weary. So how do you go in and pitch to the buyers in a way that your solution is a comprehensive solution?
What we do is we typically, when we go in to see a new hotel, we basically tell them what's happening in another hotel, and very often we're referred to this new hotel. So we just explain to them exactly how these other hotels are using it, and people get it right away. They're looking at photos on a screen. They're looking at traffic lights, red, amber, and green. Everybody understands both of those, and we've put a huge amount of effort into simplicity, and simplicity is paying off. When you show it to people, they get it. They don't need any training. I haven't met most of the users that are using Snapfix, and they all just pick it up. Everybody knows what the photo icon is. Everyone knows what the video icon is. Everybody knows how a traffic light works, and it gets adopted very easily like that.
References then really that you're working off then, is it?
Absolutely. It's all by referral at the moment. Now we will have a campaign, a social media campaign when we start launching it globally, but right now it's all by referrals.
So there's no hard cold calling at all as such?
No, thankfully no.
Cold calling in Ireland doesn't work. I think referral is the only way to do business in Ireland.
In hospitality, everybody knows each other.
You did mention, Paul, earlier on that you're going to look at the English market and the US market.
Yes.
That's a very big proposition. How do you see yourself going about that?
There's a couple of ways. A lot of the Irish chains already have hotels or office buildings or apartment buildings in the UK, so that's a great market entry point for that. And there are partners and distributors and service providers who service hospitality, who service the office sector, who service the residential sector, and we'll be partnering with them to roll it out to their customers.
And is there much competition abroad for the type of product you have?
Thankfully, all of the competition at the moment is either too complex, it's too expensive, or too inflexible. Lots of the solutions out there at the moment require you to fill out forms. So, for example, if you change a light bulb, you don't want to be spending 5 minutes filling out a form that you've changed the light bulb. So, by taking a photograph, we've really reduced the administrative time of using technology to support your work.
Sure. And do you have similar products in this country? I mean, are you up against much competition in this country in terms of your
the biggest one we see in the market is WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is really great for chat.
But that's general purpose, isn't it?
But it's general purpose. But that's the one we see more than we see anything else. It's WhatsApp. It's still very, very much paper based. Yeah. I think the sectors have been poorly served by technology to date, and we're hoping to really address that.
I see. Yeah.
There's a lot of potential here in terms of the data that you're capturing and bringing together for the industry, and it's data that maybe previously hasn't been collected except in dusty files, possibly even managed off-site. So apart from the geographical expansion into the US and latterly and the UK, have you plans to extend the offering in terms of maybe introducing a plan around the data or how that will be used, and maybe bringing in some form of technology to enhance that, whether it's AI or machine learning, some form of that?
Absolutely. The future of this is around having really smart data analytics, so that hotel managers and building managers can understand exactly what's going on in their buildings, and they can predict failures for the future. The big difference between us and a WhatsApp is that WhatsApp, when you use WhatsApp for something, the data is owned and used by Facebook, whereas the hotel manager or the building manager will own the data, and they can get their own insights from it. We will be evolving the technology as the phones get better and as the technologies get better to be able to auto-tag locations. The GPS locations will be getting better. We'll be able to say, yes, that's in room 27 rather than you saying it's in room 27. And another thing we're looking at appless apps, which are essentially using your voice to create instructions so you don't have to download an app. So you could say leaking tap room 27 and it'll create a job in Snapfix. So that's very handy for, let's say, guests of hotels who may not want to download the app but want to contribute to getting something resolved quickly.
That's really interesting, especially when you talk about the whole area of predictive maintenance, because then you're into massive cost savings.
Absolutely.
So suddenly then the benefits, you're talking about exponential benefits as opposed to maybe moderate time savings or savings in administration. So I just wonder, will this involve you partnering with people who are deploying sensors around maybe some of the plant and machinery within a building? Will you actually get into that, because that's a whole new business? So will you partner with somebody who's already in that?
Correct. We're going to leave those providers do what they do best, and all we ever want is an alert from those providers or those systems to say to when an engineer has to address something. So you'll have a building management system that will manage all the lighting or the heating, but when there is an issue and an engineer has to attend to something, we'll receive an alert into Snapfix, so that at least for the maintenance team and the building manager, they have everything in one system.
Okay, look, certainly on the construction technology side of it, AI-enabled building systems for newly developed buildings, but also retrofit for existing buildings. That's I won't even say the future of building systems, that's the expected level of building systems now. So we actually had somebody in talking to us about predictive maintenance. In fact, he moved it on to prescriptive maintenance. I didn't really understand the difference. But, we know that this is an area where savings are being made. There's an environmental benefit, there's a time benefit, there's a financial benefit, labour across the building. So will your plan, or are you planning to maybe work with portfolio managers, building managers? Is that
absolutely? We're starting to work. We've started out with hotels because they're 24/7. They demand high quality and they have a large audience of multilingual staff. When we look at apartment buildings, they're very, very similar to that, and office buildings are exactly the same. So we'll be rolling it across all of those sectors.
Right. Paul, how did you come to this?
Yeah,
my background is in software development, but I grew up on a farm in Cork. To answer your question, how long have I been in Ireland?
The farmers come up with the best solutions. I say it all the time.
And we've always been involved in the property business. Yeah. So I was managing a couple of buildings a number of years ago, and I noticed that everybody was using WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was so fantastic for reporting issues
to the manager, to the building managers.
Correct. So, but it wasn't very good for tracking them to completion.
It was a sort of group sort of thing, was it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And tell me then, in terms of apartments here, would the tenant has the option, obviously, of opting in on this? Is it?
Correct. Correct. Okay. Well, the building manager can use it in isolation, and when people phone or send a text or whatever, he or she can record it in Snapfix.
So
and of course, they can roll it out to all of the tenants as well, and that would be the ideal situation.
And
just we've talked to you about hotels. Is there much of a take up now at the apartment?
We're starting. We're rolling it out now in the apartment. We've been very much focused on hotels. And now the focus for the next quarter will be offices.
And I suppose you're going to management companies in terms of
absolutely.
the
absolutely. I think one interesting area that I was talking to somebody recently is around tenants leaving an apartment and getting their deposit back, and so that you have a full photographic record of how you entered the apartment, and we're leaving it in the exact same condition, and we'll get the deposit back or not, as the case may be.
Yeah. That's actually a great issue, and I can see that it'd be a great solution for tenants. However, I also see it would be a great solution for landlords, because generally speaking, if an issue like that goes to the RTB, it's found against the landlord and in favour of the tenant. So actually this photographic evidence might be exactly the thing. So listen, thank you so much for joining us, Paul.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to watching how Snapfix rolls out across the market and to see how you progress. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us. That was Paul McCarthy, CEO and founder of Snapfix. And actually, as we were speaking to Paul, it reminded me, of course, that CETA, the Construction IT Alliance, is hosting an event. It's a free event in the morning from 8 a.m. or possibly 8:30. Please check the website. Down at Grand Canal Dock, and it will be looking at AI-enabled building systems. So that's a free event down in Grand Canal Dock tomorrow, Wednesday morning. And in the meantime, thank you to all of our guests who were in studio today. Thank you, Brian, and also thank you to Shane Flynn on sound and Katie Talon, our producer. Next up, Bowl of Soul.